housekeeping. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the last workshop of the day. How exciting. You're all so much more educated than when you started this morning, which is fabulous. We love that. We love getting smarter. So welcome, welcome. As we get to the top of the hour, I'm just going to keep welcoming all of you. So happy to have you all. So happy to have Oxys presenting at the end of the day. They have great information. So we're so pleased that they're part of this whole thing. And again, I'm just admitting everyone, and then I'll just kick it all off, and then I'll hand it over to the Oxys team so that we can really get started and get your input as well. We certainly want it to be interactive, especially since it's the end of the day. So we want you attentive and talking with us all.
Angela, you know, you said we're getting smarter. The average CFO Leadership Council member has an IQ of 180.
For anyone who doesn't know Jack McCullough, he's the founder of the CFO Leadership Council. So glad that he's here, part of this conversation.
A little too much.
You know, we're just getting smarter every day, Jack. So I think we're going to start because we are at the top of the hour, and I'll just keep letting people into the room as we go along. So welcome, everyone. Just a real quick hello to everyone. This workshop, like I was saying, is at the end of the day. Most common RPA implementation pitfalls and how to avoid them, going from POC to hyper automation. This is being brought to you by our wonderful team at Oxys, and I'm going to just give a little quick housekeeping because you probably all heard it a few times already. Of course, we want you attentive, and if this is CPE worthy, so if you are looking to get CPE for this, you do get one CPE. You just need to make sure that you answer the 4 polling questions that come your way, and we will be bringing them to you so that you can answer those. Really, other than that, we just want you to be as interactive as you want. Please ask questions. If for some reason you don't get to a question or an answer today, remember that this team will be in the exhibit hall for tomorrow morning starting at 9 a.m. I highly recommend that you go see them. You'll probably have questions after you're thinking about it this evening, and so they'll be there to answer whatever you don't get to ask today. So with that, Eduardo, I'm just going to be quiet. I'm going to hand it right off to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for coming. I'm really happy to be in this session. I think we're going to be talking about a very relevant and hot topic around automation, and I'm really happy to have Kishore from UiPath and Courtney Dominguez, who has an amazing experience building automation programs at large scale. And we're going to be talking about the main pitfalls on being able to scale RPA and how to avoid them, and then really talk about the lessons learned that we have found after implementing such a innovative technology across many organizations, and see how this can help you really achieve scaled automation. So that being said, let's take a look at the RPA and how it's been accelerating. And with COVID, and people have decided to really start to automate a lot more processes, and 50% of organizations will increase their RPA spend over the next year. Interesting numbers such as in 2019, we saw 63% increase on RPA software purchases, and it's expected to get universal adoption by 2023. It's just a technology that is being adopted in every industry, in every size of company. And it's something that all organizations are looking to really bring digital transformation and also provide a lot more productivity and efficiency than any other project, at least that I've been involved before. But there's another side of this story, right? It's interesting how 65% of organizations haven't been able to automate more than 10 processes, and there is only a very limited number of organizations that have actually gone all the way through full scale with 50 or more processes. Only 3% have reported to have been able to do that. And then 63% of organizations have actually said that it's taken them longer to implement RPA than they originally thought. And this is why we thought that this specific topic would be a great topic to talk about today, to really understand why is this happening, how to avoid it, and how organizations that have been able to scale it fast and organized and been successful at it have really done what have they done and how to do that. So before we get into the topic, I just wanted to ask our first question, polling question. What best describes the stage of where you are in your RPA automation journey? Are you planning to get started in 2021? Are you piloting, which means that you are doing a limited number of processes? Are you implementing, or RPA is not a priority right now? Just give it a minute.
Exactly. And audience, the quicker you can answer that, the better off we'll be, so that we can get back to the conversation, and especially if you have any questions that you want to ask this team. So we'll wait, keep it open just a little bit more, and then I'll share that with you, Eduardo. Couple more seconds. Thank you, audience, for being attentive. We appreciate it. Quick to answer. Wonderful. And with that, I'm going to end, and I'll just share that with you really quickly. So it looks like 33% plan to get started in 2021, 21% piloting less than 10 processes in production, 8% say implementing more than 10 processes and expanding, and 38% say RPA is not a priority. Surprised, Eduardo?
I'm surprised 38% would say it's not a priority right now. I think that it will come in 2021. I think that almost every organization is going to be looking at technology like RPA to really accelerate the efficiencies within the organizations. And I'm also looking at two companies that have actually scaled over 10 processes, which is great. And most of the organizations are exactly where the 33% are, which is planning to get started and looking at it. I know it's been a couple of years where everybody's been talking about RPA, but truly it is an innovative technology that it's now starting to really scale. So with this said, the question is, why is it so hard to scale it? And we're going to be talking about different reasons why. And one of them is a lot of organizations should strive to get RPA adoption. And to me, that is the key to really being able to scale it. But in order to have widespread adoption, there's a lot of things that need to be in place. You need to have executive alignment. We've been talking about this for a while. I think Kishore and I were talking about it. And, a lot of organizations can do two things. Either they really don't have a vision and they just have somebody that wants to do automation. They go and start and do one thing, but they really then stall because they have no visibility on how the technology can really be implemented across the organization. But then the other side of the coin is, they're trying to boil the ocean, and paralysis analysis gets them stuck. So having that executive alignment of, here is where we're going to get the most bang for the buck and we're going to get started is critical in order to get the push to be able to go after automation. Then have realistic expectations. 100% automation on every single transaction is rarely the case. It's almost impossible to get. So understanding operational complexities and dependencies on external applications or even external inputs such as vendor information or client information, or expecting for an external component to change in order for you to be able to achieve the automation is something that needs to be taken into consideration. And there's another very important thing. Not every implementation will have an immediate payback, which is something that a lot of people revert to. The initial automations are an extreme fast payback. So a lot of organizations say, hey, if it's not 12-month payback, I don't want to go after it, which is weird because, I had not received or heard of 12-month payback before RPA. And, it's something that people are getting used to. And then building trust in the technology. And I'm not talking about that RPA platforms work. I think that is a proven fact. The whole idea is to try to build trust in the organization, that the organization trusts that the automations that are being built are doing what they're supposed to be doing, that the expected result will be provided, and so that they don't revert back to doing things manually and badmouth the automation program across the organization, and then that leads to stalling automations, the automation program. And another important thing is lack of talent and experience drives a lot of the failures by having very long-term implementations that end up losing traction. And naturally, we want to capture the value. A lot of organizations are doing this to build efficiencies, build capacity, faster, more accurate processing. So you want to make sure that that is measured and the return on investment is basically given back. If some of these things are not in place, you're going to end up with no adoption, organizational impatience, loss of sponsorship, and then a stalled automation program. in a little bit of how the, I guess the life cycle of automation, how it works, you first start with at least building in parallel, I would say, the proof of concept and your strategy. But a lot of organizations either overlook or have an incomplete strategy or vision of what they want to do with automation, or they have a complete but partially successful POC that took them too much time, that did not bring the value that was expected, which leads to stalling automations and it stalls further investment. Not having the right operating model in place to be able to scale it up, not just to build and design new automations, but also be able to, at the last piece of our slide to the right, is really have the right structure to support and maintain those bots. Robots are not meant to be built and forget them and they will work forever. They have to be, there has to be a continuous improvement program. There's got to be a maintenance team that understands when these bots are supposed to run. And if applications change, if accesses change, somebody's got to be there to make sure that you receive the long-term value of the automations that have been built. So if none of these things are in place, it's going to be really hard to get the organization to really find adoption, because you can be very successful. And then if your automation works for 3 months and then something changes, it breaks, and it takes you another 3 months to get it back and operational, the operations team is going to hurt because of it. And you're going to lose immediate buy-in. So it's important to understand that. And the last thing is seeing automation more than just cost reduction. A lot of organizations start automation and thinking, all I want to do is reduce heads, or all I want to do is reduce cost. But the reality is that automation brings so much more. Improved visibility. It in a lot of cases have actually created revenue enablement, faster sales cycle time, and provides a lot of scalability. There's a lot of seasonal industries out there. Like an example would be construction. You know, you go through one project, you have a lot of purchasing, you have a lot of transaction handling, and then the construction goes down. So you're basically staffing up and down based on your needs. And that's one simple example. But how automation can come in and say, hey, you're going to have a much stabler staffing model, and automation will help you, spike up when you actually need it. So with this, I wanted to get to our second polling question, and that is, what is the primary challenge that is impacting your ability to scale your automation program? For the people who actually said that they're starting, is it finding the right resource and executive to execute the program? Is it performance issues with my current RPA partner? Is it getting funds and proving the ROI, selecting additional process to scale the program, or I'm not facing any challenges?
So again, Eduardo, we have that out there, and our audience is answering it quickly. Again, thank you for being so attentive, audience, and answering the polling question quickly. I know just a reminder too, that you can put questions in the chat area, and we'll be reviewing that and looking at that. I know that there's one in there already, and we'll get to it shortly. But just a couple more seconds, and then we'll close the polling. Okay, thank you, audience. And so just to share those results with you, Eduardo, 33% say finding the right resources to execute the program. 29% say getting funds, improving ROI. 21% selecting additional processes to scale the program. 17% says I'm not facing any challenges. And 0% said performance issues with my current RPA partner.
Well, that's great. For the ones who have partners, it's great that you guys have chosen a good partner. It's something that to me surprises me a little bit. You know, at the beginning, it is a rocky start when there's a relationship. So a lot of organizations go through that. Finding the right resources to execute the program is actually what most organizations are going through. I think Keisha was mentioning yesterday when we were talking that it's the second most looked out position in LinkedIn, RPA developers and RPA employees or professionals as a whole. So it's interesting to see that is actually something that we're seeing on the market. So with this, I wanted to get into the more conversational area of today, into the panel, and I wanted to really go in and start looking at the different I guess aspects of being able to scale your RPA program. And with that, we wanted to talk about the role of the CFO in the intelligent automation, journey. And I wanted to ask Courtney, so what do you think should be the role of the CFO in an automation journey, and how to get organizational alignment?
Yeah, so thanks, Eddie. So I think that, traditionally the role of the CFO has really been focused on, the finance organization and revenue growth, and cost containment, right? So it wasn't really a lot to do with maybe technology. And as these digital transformation programs are rolling out, they very typically get started within the finance and accounting space. Because of the manual nature of all of the transaction processing. So, there's a lot of hands-on stuff, maybe in the past, the finance organization, I know that was ripe for a lot of macros, and leveraging Excel. And so RPA, RPA isn't an Excel macro, but it is kind of like a macro, but the beauty of it is it spans across, various applications. So, whether you're running SAP or Oracle or Microsoft Dynamics, it can go out and do a lot of that manual hands-on transaction processing, kind of like, a macro in Excel where you've programmed it to do something. So I think where it traditionally starts is within finance and accounting, because they're so used to having some level of automation already within the organization. So that really makes the role of the CFO, evolve. So they're really looking at more of how can they leverage technology and expand it beyond those Excel macros, which are or access databases, which are so ripe within the finance and accounting organization. Where I've seen these projects be very successful is where you have a real partnership between the business and the CFO and IT. I think technology projects in the past have traditionally been, an IT project, and RPA is definitely not an IT project. It is definitely a partnership between the business and the technology. It's really the people, the process, and the technology stack that make these projects so successful. So, I think that the role of the CFO has really evolved to be a partnership between, the CFO and IT. And I know, Kishore, I know you've seen this in the organizations that you're working with as well, where, the most successful ones are the ones where there's a real partnership between those entities.
Absolutely. Courtney, I'll echo your statements, but before I respond there, I do want to say Happy Veterans Day to everybody and all the veterans that are on this call. Thank you for your service. It really means a lot to us and the country. What I'll talk about is why do organizations even look at automation to begin with, right? It's primarily from an IT-led project, but CFOs are starting to get a lot more involved with the technology decisions today. And it's primarily because of technical debt in a lot of these organizations. There's a lot of technology debt within these organizations, and they're looking for quick ways, and RPA is exactly that. It's a quick way to resolve a lot of the technology debt that exists out there. So CFOs and CIOs are working much closer together than ever before on a lot of these technology decisions, and really identifying what those functional areas are within the organization where they can have the biggest impact. And like you said, Courtney, finance is typically where a lot of organizations start their automation programs. Why? I mean, we all know this on this call, right? There are a lot of repetitive, mundane tasks within finance, high volume transactions that are perfect use cases for automation. So the CFO plays an instrumental role in the automation program, but what's equally as important is for the CFO to look at automation not only within that one department, but to look at it organization wide. Because if you're going to continue to evolve that program, you're going to have to work in concert with IT and other leaders in other departments to make sure that you continue to drive that value organization wide.
Thanks, Kishore. And I think that's absolutely right. One of the things that we also need to make sure that we do is that the role of the CFO is also, in order to maintain a program going, it's that finance value measurement that has been lacking in the past 3-4 years. And this is something that most platforms like UiPath has really expanded their their offering into actually go into the measuring end of what the benefit of what the program is building. And in the past, it was very often to have a lot of automations being unchecked, and there was a perception of benefit, but it wasn't being measured. So understanding that benefit that the program is providing is vital to the scaling the program. So moving along into, I guess, I've already touched some points, but I just wanted to get the panel's point of view on organizational adoption. So I just wanted to ask Courtney, what do you think are the drivers to achieve this?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been on both sides of this coin, right? So I work as a consultant now, but in the past I was also a practitioner and stood up a program. And I think one of the critical parts of that is having a clear vision and setting that really at the leadership level. So making sure that, at your leadership level, you understand what the strategy is. RPA tends to be a component of an overall digital strategy. You're often going to have, RPA is a tool in the tool chest. It's not necessarily the tool. And I think that companies typically come at these automation and these digitization programs with a lot of different, tools in their tool bag. RPA being, of course, a critical one. But I think it's important that that vision gets set at the leadership level and then cascaded down and communicated down into the organization. And really, this is one of the reasons why automation programs fail. So I think you were saying, Eddie, at the beginning of the call that, a lot of times organizations, this is kind of a pet project that somebody wants to do. And if that's the case, that's fine, but it's probably not going to expand very far because it's very difficult to drive a program like this at the, the department level or the individual level without having that leadership at the top really supporting it. Especially we're talking about RPA where, it's automation and you're talking about automating tasks, right? I mean, individuals still get really scared when they hear that and you're talking about automating pieces or even whole parts of someone's job, and that's scary. So, if that strategic vision isn't being communicated from the top down, your individuals at the levels where they're actually doing those tasks aren't going to support it because they don't know that they need to, and they don't know that this is a strategic role, and they don't know what their role is in driving this for the company. So without having that clear message coming down, guaranteed, the program is not going to be successful. It's a really critical component to having everybody on board and understanding that what that looks like.
That's really insightful, and I think that you touched the point there that it's critical. There's a lot of apprehension against RPA at the beginning when you're talking about automation of somebody's job. And I think I would love to hear, Kishore's point of view regarding that, because you've done it in so many organizations, and it's a natural reaction to automation.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. I'll give you an example. I'm working with a lot of executives down here in South Florida. I'm based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's everyone's heard the term, "Oh, robots are coming for my job," right? Everyone's scared of robots coming for their jobs. But through COVID times, I think everyone on this call can agree, every organization has seen an increase in productivity because of work from home. Every organization has seen folks that typically work out of an office be at home, be more available, going from call to call. The productivity increase is absolutely there. And while most executives and leaders are thankful for that, they know that it is unsustainable, right? So what they're doing is they're looking at technologies such as automation, digital assistants, not only in the back office, because when we look at automation historically and in the past, and it still applies today, a lot of repetitive mundane tasks in the back office can be automated, no doubt, and that is where a lot of organizations start. But executives and leaders are looking at automation technologies such as digital assistants to work in conjunction with humans, so that the productivity, when they look at productivity increase over 2021 and beyond, they're looking at the wellness of their humans and their employees that are working for those organizations, and leveraging the capabilities of these digital assistants to do those repetitive mundane tasks at the desktop level and leave the critical thinking tasks to humans, which is what we were meant to do.
No, and I think that resonates a lot with what I've seen. A lot of the work that we're trying to supplement with bots is something that people actually don't want to do. If you look at jobs that are highly repetitive, day in and day out, it's not something. If you have, like I mentioned always, if you have somebody that has been doing invoice processing for 5 years, they probably have been doing it for 20. it's the new generation of people don't want to do that job often. And there's a lot of organizations that have a strong team of people who have been doing it, and I think they're going to keep doing it, but it's going to be a really hard time for them to replace it. And if they do, you're going to have, there's a lot of turnover in these positions. People don't want to stay there for long. And there's a lot of cost outside of just salaries. This cost of retraining, cost of recruiting, and in order to just have a person work on it for 6 months, you train them for 2, they are productive for 4, and then you have to start all over again. And this is where we have seen that done right, people actually respond very positively, and trying to find new opportunities for automation and bringing, how can you make my life better, my job easier, and so that I can spend the time that I want on better, more value-added activities. So let's look at what it will take to actually build an RPA team. So a lot of organizations just decide to, let's just go ahead and hire developers, and we're going to just hire a person that can lead them and get on with it. And that's kind of one of the main, I would say, pitfalls and mistakes that a lot of organizations make. Regardless of the size of your organization, there's a lot of roles that need to be played. You're going to have your sponsors, and there's a lot of people in here that do not play a full-time role, but you're going to need architects and engineers to be involved in this. There is a infrastructure planning that needs to be done, stand up and maintenance. There's got to be a solutions architecture that can really understand the process and be able to build and design the robots. But on the other hand, you really need a lot of people who understands business. Like I think Courtney was mentioning, this is a business-driven solution. You need to understand what the business exceptions, complications, and variations are happening in your business to truly be successful. I think that when we were getting started and when we got started, we were just building robots for ourselves, since we actually have a center that does finance and accounting in Costa Rica, and we made our own mistakes, right? We didn't go that deep. We started only automating the happy path, and we ended up with automations that really didn't bring a lot of value. So getting that skill set is critical, and we found that the hard way. And now we have a team that can build that, and then the RPA developers and the support team. And the support team should be a different team than the development team. So with this said, a lot of organizations revert to the lowest cost location. The lowest cost version of an RPA program is to actually build it on your own. And for some organizations, that is actually true. It depends on your size of the program, how much you want to go after. But we have seen that it's not necessarily the lowest cost, because if you have to build it from the ground up, it's going to take you longer time to get the benefit, and each implementation can be actually more costly than actually partnering with a team that could be fully outsourced or hybrid. So I wanted to get Kishore's point of view on what are you seeing out there? How are clients leveraging internal and external resources to get this done?
Eddie, it's really mixed, right? It's a mixed approach from clients based on the different stages they are in the implementation, right? If you're in the POC stage, some clients tend to approach that by leveraging resources internally or hiring on resources. And if you are, further along and you have a good pipeline of automations that you've developed, and once you have executive buy-in and budgets allocated, then it's a little bit easier to get a partner involved. But Eddie, you let the cat out of the bag. LinkedIn released an emerging jobs report earlier this year. And the number 2 job that was on there, and it was a 40% increase from the prior year, as far as demand is concerned, is a robotics engineer. So it's not easy to find these resources, and that's where leveraging a partner really is instrumental in getting your RPA program off the ground. But what I will speak to is, organizations such as UiPath, we have over 6,000 customers globally, and we are working with universities on academic alliance programs to get the next generation of workforce, that the graduates, ready for these automation jobs, whether they are business analyst roles, whether they are developer roles, whatever they are, we are getting them prepped and ready. And we are seeing that in 2021 and beyond, that is when we are really going to see an impact in the workforce moving forward.
Great. And Courtney, as a person who had to build it, I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I did have to build a program, or enjoyed building a program, I should say. And at the time, I mean, this was a few years ago. This was around 2017 when I first started working with RPA and also, building a team out. And we did do it totally in-house. I can tell you, the availability of experienced resources at that time were very limited and still are. Like Kishore said, it's very much a skill set that's in demand. So finding experienced help is very competitive. The market out there to find people with experience is challenging because so many organizations are doing this and want to take advantage of people that have some experience. So, in my case, we did build it in-house. Now, we selected, though, an interesting mix of business people that were technically savvy and more IT oriented folks. So, having that combination of those individuals with really strong business skills and a little bit tech savvy and very curious, and also, the folks that have more of a strong computer science or an IT background, I think was a great combination. It really gave us that breadth and depth of, having that knowledge of understanding, especially when you're looking at a pipeline and understanding kind of processes that you want to look to automate, having that IT knowledge. And then of course, having, the process analyst, the business analyst, your IT administrator, you have a lot of roles on the slide. And I think that it's very, aspirational to have all of these roles on your team. I think, like you already mentioned, a lot of these may not be a full-time role. Your automation sponsor probably isn't a full-time role. So, a number of these are going to be roles that are probably maybe even combined, maybe combine the solution architect and the infrastructure as you're starting out your program, and then those become more full-time roles later. So, from my own experience, we did, insource and build everything internally, again, starting, a few years ago. From a consulting side of things, I have seen the hybrid model work very well. You can, like you said, ramp quicker because you are bringing in that partner to help you, gain velocity while you're training up your internal resources, so that you're able to, get that knowledge and be able to do that critical production support, going forward, and obviously doing the building as well. So I've seen hybrid be, very, very successful. And then of course there's completely outsourcing it. So I think it's just a matter of what companies are looking for from an appetite perspective. Some of those, like you already said, are going to be more costly than others. But having some type of capability to be able to support this going forward, I think is really important. So I think whether you go hybrid or, internally building this capability internally, I think it's important to be able to eventually bring that in-house or able to do the support and continue to grow the program on your own going forward.
Yeah, and I also think that it's important to add that independent on your size, the curve is going to be larger or smaller, but at the end, you're going to go through a curve of starting to develop, get to the peak. There's going to be diminishing returns, and a lot of things are going to be developing, and there's going to be this long tail of you're just going to have to work on maintaining those automations and making sure that the benefit is still being provided. I believe that it's going to be really hard to maintain talent just doing that work on the long term. So this is where I think that having the hybrid model can enable you to have a team and support that won't create a problem going forward, and making sure that you can actually maintain long-term value. Developers want to develop. And I think as we were talking about developers, I think it was interesting that you mentioned the business skill set within the RPA developer. As much as we call it RPA developer, is not line by line coding. And what we saw when we started this is that hardcore developers were not as great as doing this.
Right.
And actually tech savvy, business oriented people that could actually do the bridge between the two. So I totally agree with that. So with this, I wanted to get to our next polling question, which is, do you agree that working with an external partner can help you accelerate your automation journey? And just take some time to answer the question.
Yep, exactly. And boy, are they paying attention. Quick to answer that polling question. We love it. We love it. And audience, I do see that you're putting a couple of questions in the chat area. We will get to them. I'm sure we'll have time. And Fabiana, thank you for answering some of them already. We appreciate that. So we'll bring whatever has not been answered to our experts who are speaking to us. In the meantime, we're collecting. We'll give it just a couple more seconds, and then I'll share that with you, Eduardo, and the rest of you. Okay, thank you so much. Going to end that one and just share the results really quickly. So it looks like 41% strongly agree, 36% agree, 18% are neutral, 5% disagree, and nobody strongly disagrees.
And I think that aligns with what we have seen. Most organizations truly think that it's a good way to get started and looking at the different roles that need to be played as we were talking about it. If you want to build 2 or 3 automations at the beginning, it's going to be really hard to assemble a team that is going to be cost efficient, that we're going to be able to do this effectively and quick and bring the value and show how this technology can actually change an organization. So I think it truly aligns with what we're seeing. So let me move this out of the way. And let's move on to our next topic on our discussion, which is, the challenge of operating at scale. It's not as simple as just to do one process. When you do an enterprise program, it's very different. So, Courtney, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, on understanding the complexity that you have to go through as you scale this up from moving from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to many. I wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the people in the process, and I know Kishore is going to talk a bit more about the technology piece. So, I mean, there's a lot. I think this could be a topic that we've talk about all day, really. So I'm just going to cover some of the things that I think are most important. So, we've talked a little bit about having a healthy pipeline and a prioritized backlog. I mean, I can't emphasize enough, how important that is. Just making sure that you're going out and looking for opportunities within the organization and continuing to kind of feed that, and feed that team so that they can continue to show value. Having a healthy pipeline, meaning, there's a number of ways to do that. You can look for kind of the low-hanging fruit, like you talked about. So looking for opportunities that maybe are more, I like to think of these as more individual or task-based, not necessarily things that, may have a huge impact on the bottom line, but maybe are really kind of the enablement for the productivity and enablement for the individuals that are doing these tasks. And then also looking at maybe more departmental. So looking at your AP department, right? And looking how you're processing your AP invoices, or looking at cash management and how you're applying cash and bringing in and applying the amounts that are coming in every day from the bank. So, you can look at those very departmentally and find opportunities and ways to be able to make a big impact on a specific, department. And then there's obviously looking at it from a kind of the bigger bang, right? I like to think of it as the wow factor, or the ways of working, and looking at it really cross department. So, how you take maybe the tax payments that are coming from the tax department and get that over to AP and make it so that it's touchless and really has that, that cross department. Because I think that's really where you start to see the real bang for the buck. So, cash, record to report is really where you're going to start seeing that kind of big things. But those things take a lot more time. Typically, you have a lot more process improvement opportunities that you need to do before you can do those automations. Sometimes you break those automations down too. So I think having a number of ways that you are going out and looking for those opportunities really helps you build that pipeline of work and gets you that prioritized backlog, so you can really continue to show value. So I think it's important to kind of look at all 3 of those areas and how you're getting your opportunities into your pipeline. And then, like you already talked about, Eddie, right? So plan for production support. It's so important, because I think that especially when you get to 10 or beyond 10, you probably don't have, at least if you've done them right, you probably don't have a lot of production support that you're doing right now. But what I find is once you get beyond 10 and you don't have a plan for that production support going in, that's when you start to scramble. So it's really important to have that, idea of how you're going to do, your production support ahead of time. Because like you said, RPA developers especially want to work on fun stuff. They don't necessarily want to be doing production support all day long. And if you don't have any other plan, that's exactly what happens. Your team that should be focusing on delivering value for the organization is just doing break fix all day long, and not really continuing to work on that pipeline of work. So I think going in and having that plan for how you're going to support these processes is critical to being able to operate at scale, because less than 10, it's not a huge part of your time, and it's not a huge part of what your developers are doing. But after that, it becomes really important. So I think having, for me that how you are sourcing your work and planning for production support are really important. And Kishore, I know you're going to talk about the technology side of it, because that's equally important when you're talking about operating at scale.
Yes, and I think before we get into that, I just wanted to also echo the, that, segregation between what should be the team that is doing implementations and the team that is doing support. But it's easier said than done.
It is, yeah.
Moving, all the knowledge and the information. We all have macros that somebody built that left the organization,
and they break.
And they break, and they don't know how they work, and it becomes a headache. And it's pretty much, imagine that, but much worse. You need to make sure that the processes are documented correctly, that you have the monitoring and alerts set up in the code that enable the support team to be able to see when something went wrong with print screens and issues, and we use BI platforms like Insights from UiPath, but in some organizations that they are Tableau shops, we go there, or Power BI, in order to really understand what's happening with your bots, when they were supposed to run and they didn't run, when there is a volume spike, or the other way around, with something, nothing is happening. It's really important to be on top of that. So getting there and being able to really maintain, and to me, the whole thing is not just maintain that the bots keep working, long-term value. How do you make sure that you have an organization that can provide long-term value on your automations for years to come?
Sure. Not
just a couple of months. So this being said, and this is why I think it's a good leeway into what Kishore is going to be focusing on, and these are the things that really enable you to get that done. So Kishore, with further ado, I just wanted to explain us, what does it take, tech-wise, to achieve that?
Yeah, no, I mean, Courtney and Eddie, that is spot on, right? From a people and process standpoint, what you described is exactly what my clients have experienced as they as they start their automation journey, and also as they continue to evolve their journey, right? So here at UiPath, we have focused a lot on helping our clients develop a successful automation operating model, because the operating model doesn't only begin and end at getting bots in and then getting them in production, and then you walk away and say, okay, well, we did RPA. So it's not as easy as that. It's having the correct and the right platform available to you to support the end-to-end automation operating model. So if you look at the slide, and I'll break this down for you. I love the pie in the middle, because we're coming up to Thanksgiving, and I'm going to use the pie analogy here. But we have 4 slices here, right? So you have the discover phase. Discovery up front is absolutely a critical phase of the operating model and the process, because you want to help identify the correct processes, the right processes, the high value processes that align with the executives' objectives and goals from an organization standpoint. And what you really want to do in that phase is, you don't want to just automate just the happy path, because if you sit side by side, someone from the business, and you ask them, okay, walk me through what your procure to pay process looks like, they're going to describe to you the happy path. This happens, and then that happens. What you typically don't find is all of the exceptions along the way, all the different people that the process touches, and then the upstream and downstream effects of that process. So that is part of the discovery phase, and it is a critical process. A critical piece of the process. Then you move into the build phase. This is where the development happens, and it goes back to our conversation around, are there developers out there that you can tap into? Are there partners that you can tap into help build your processes? And looking for a tool that's really easy to use by a business tech person, that they can build out these automations. Then you manage your robots. You're going, just like you have an HR process, you have a management for your human workforce, you need to have a management platform that is going to manage your digital workforce. And then engagement. What does engagement mean? How do you engage robots and humans to work in tandem with each other? That is a critical part of the process, and that is where automation is shifting to more of these digital assistants. The circle surrounding that is the continuous measurement of the success of that automation program. That is what gets these executives jazzed up. They want to see the dashboards. They want to be able to see in real time the impact of automation and their robots that are in production. How much have I saved, or how much productivity have I increased today? We enable that with this platform. And then what's really important to IT, because we spoke about it in the beginning and it kind of all ties in together, the CFO and the CIO works really close together, but governance and controls, absolutely important throughout the entire life cycle and journey of automation. So I just wanted to give you a quick flavor of the UiPath automation platform. And as you make decisions on which path you go with which technology, you want to look at automation as a journey, as an evolutionary journey, and you want to choose the right platform for that.
Thanks, Kishore. And I think that's a critical differentiator. We have been working with this platform. This was very different than this now for almost 5 years, and it's so critical to be able to really achieve true intelligent automation, to have a platform that enables a scalable model that can actually control many automations and be able to feed different robots for the exact same work and even increase productivity than what you're actually doing manually. One of the things that I know is that most bots that I have ever built don't do the work exactly like humans do because of the capabilities of the platform. I'm really glad that we have partnered together.
I have a couple of questions from Yalima. One of them is, does the automation operator work in collaboration with the accounting department? How is output tested?
I would need a little bit more clarification on that. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, and I don't know, Yalima, if you want to also unmute yourself, but I think that she's trying to understand how is the process of actually getting the robot into production? How is the communication and collaboration between the automation operator or the developer and the accounting team that is the subject matter expert on the process today? How is the testing and design? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that will depend on the process. As Kishore was saying, there are some processes that are made so that you are basically working with a robot in your own laptop as a digital assistant, and there are some automations that are built in a unattended. There is no human interaction required, such as you're sending emails as actions, and then robots are taking actions, or you're having a workflow tool that gets something approved, and then the robot picks it up. Within UiPath, you have Action Center that actually lets you work with robots in a similar fashion as a workflow tool. So robots will do something. If they need your approval, it will queue it up for you or your team. They will come in, review the information, accept it, and then the robot continues. So this interaction with automation will vary depending on the process. In order to put it into production, the design, of course, how the workflow of getting a robot in production works is pretty much you're doing the design on the business end, and a solutions architect looks at the business requirements and creates the robotic RPA process design. Then we build it on a non-production environment that then gets heavily tested with many test case scenarios. We identify new scenarios that have not been thought of, and then we control for them. And before we move it into production, every single robot needs to go through that life cycle. I'm hoping that answers a little bit of your question. I don't know if Courtney or Kishore want to add anything to that.
So Eduardo, you require continuous input from the accounting department, say, for testing.
Yeah, we would need test case scenarios of what would the robot theoretically would be doing before you move it into production. So we would build a test scenario matrix of all the different potential scenarios and their outcomes, and then we would basically put it into a non-production version of the bot, test it, make sure that it's working to specs, and then move it into a production environment.
So there's an ongoing service fee involved.
The licensing, and there is an ongoing fee for maintenance. just to make sure that those robots are working and being maintained. If there's any changes on the infrastructure, network, application access, or application changes, or new scenarios that we would like to add on that were not thought of before we even begin. If a robot encounters something that has never seen before, it's naturally going to stop and ask for your help. This is an unexpected situation. And then there's a ongoing, at the beginning it's a little bit, it's impossible for any person to understand every single scenario that will come once you move it into production. And for this reason, there is once it's built, moved into production, there's a hypercare period where we see other things that we may not have thought of before really thinking, okay, this is stable and we can move it into a long-term support.
Is it a set monthly fee or is it hourly?
It's a set monthly fee in our world.
Oh, okay.
Don't know other partners how they work.
Yeah. And to your question about the business case, right? Like, how did we calculate the 12-month payback period? It's the combination of all of those things. The one-time implementation cost of building the robots, and then the ongoing cost of both the licenses, in this case, for example, the UiPath licensing, as well as that annual maintenance fee. That, you know, it's really, at the end, that maintenance fee is very cost effective because, as you can imagine, we have these resources that we share across clients, and they support multiple robots. Eduardo always says a data point that I think is very valuable, that in order for you to justify having one dedicated RPA operator or support person, you probably need what, 30 to 40 robots?
If they're done right, you should have about 30 processes per FD. So before we I know we're on the top of the time. Being mindful of people's time, I just wanted to ask our last question on polling question. So would you like to schedule a consultation with Oxys to explore ways to support your automation program or help you build your automation program?
So this one I'll share after the presentation. I'll share it with all of you. So if there are any other questions, because you're right, we are at the top of the hour. So how about in closing, Eduardo or Kishore, Courtney, maybe something to have them leave with for this evening?
Yeah, Courtney, I'll go first if you don't mind.
You got it.
Yeah. Thank you. So I want to thank everybody for your time today. If there was one thing that I'd leave you with is, you know, how are you going to measure the success of your RPA program? And that's very subjective, because a lot of organizations, a lot of people start by measuring it by the number of processes or bots that are in production, and that is really, in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of others feel that way, is that is not. It's not a marker for success, right? You have to quantify it either by some of the metrics that are important to the executive teams. Is it cost takeout, right? Is it compliance? Is it accuracy? Is it productivity increase? And I'm working with organizations where there's a nominal investment from a technology and services standpoint, and it is reaping that organization tens of millions of dollars in business value. So while you can start small, it is important to continuously measure the success of that program so that you get your executive buy-in, you continue to evolve the program, and you continue to expand it beyond that single department use case. So with that, over to you, Courtney.
Yeah, so I think we talked a lot about metrics, and especially from a finance and a CFO perspective, typically, you know, ROI is one that's really critical, you know, especially when you're starting out. And it also tends to be a major component of prioritization of your backlog. What I would recommend is make sure that you not only measure that at the beginning, but also at the end. So make sure that once you have it in production, you go back and you confirm that what you said you were going to get is what you're actually getting, because what I found is that those numbers are overinflated at the beginning. Just like any other project that you do, someone says they're going to get some value from it, you know, X value. And if you never go back and measure and confirm that you actually got it, I can almost guarantee that what is going to hit your bottom line from a financial perspective is not going to be what you thought it was going in. So hold those business people accountable to the ROI that they say they're going to get. You won't have that problem if you keep them honest. But you know, you need to make sure that you're measuring it before and after it goes in.
And to Courtney's point, in terms of really getting the expected results, change management is so important because at the end, you're implementing all of this automation, freeing up multiple people from the work that they're doing. But if you don't start redistributing the remaining manual work and redefining the roles, it's very hard to actually get the FTE reduction that you're expecting because you basically need to do a full restructuring sometimes. And it's relabeling also the type of work that the new organization is going to be focused on, much more analytical, much more working on exceptions. And there is a big organizational change management component to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Me, I just want to thank everybody, Kishore and Courtney, and everybody that joined today. I think it was a great session, and I was happy to be here today. So.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
great
all
job.
so much. Oxys team,
Excellent.
you're fabulous. Such great information. Thank you to our audience. We really appreciated that. And again, if you are around tomorrow morning, you definitely want to go visit them in the exhibit halls. You'll probably think of other questions tonight, and they'll be happy to answer any questions at that time. So again, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Have an excellent evening, and we'll see you tomorrow, we hope. Stay well, stay connected.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.